Welcome, everyone, to the AAUW annual meeting and virtual conference. My name is Marissa Fink, and I am the events coordinator. We are glad you are here. I'm going to introduce the president of AAUW as our very first speaker, and then you'll also be hearing from Claudia Carmichael, our Oregon Program Vice President. Catherine, please.
Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome AAUW of Oregon members, advocates, change makers. I have just a few things I need to say because a few months ago I was at a hearing and I heard a community college student here in Oregon testifying at a local hearing, speaking about her two jobs, choosing between textbooks and rent, about being the first in her family to pursue a degree, and about her nearly walking away because the math didn't work. Not the math in her classes, but the math in her life. She stood there, voice steady but urgent, saying, I am doing everything I was told would lead to opportunity. How come it's still not enough? I'll tell you, that question should stay with us because it's not just her question, it's Oregon's question, and it's our responsibility to answer it. So as we gather here for our 101st annual meeting, not just to celebrate our history, but to confront this moment in our state. Oregon prides itself on valuing education, fairness, opportunity, and yet we all know the reality is much more complicated. Women in Oregon still face persistent wage gaps. Student debt continues to shape and limit life choices. Access to higher education remains uneven, especially for rural communities, women of color, those balancing work, caregiving, and school. Childcare shortages hold back careers. Too many policy decisions are still made without fully accounting for their impact on women and girls. At the same time, we're seeing growing pressure on those very systems meant to expand opportunity, public education, equitable funding, and inclusive policies. I want to be clear, equity does not advance on its own. It advances or retreats based on policy choices. It lives in Oregon's budget priorities. It lives in how we fund our schools and colleges. It lives in whether pay equity laws are enforced and strengthened. It lives in whether we expand access to affordable childcare and protect pathways to higher education. And right now, those decisions are being made with or without us. So the question is not whether AAUW of Oregon has a role to play. The question is whether we will meet this moment with the urgency and focus it requires. Because we can't afford to be passive. We must be present in the rooms where decisions are made, from school boards in our smallest town to committees in Salem. We must track legislation, testify, write, organize, and vote with intention. We must hold leaders accountable, not just for what they promise, but for what they deliver. And we must be strategic because the challenges we face are coordinated and persistent. So we must be more so. We must build coalitions across communities. We support policies that expand access to education and economic security. We invest in the next generation of women leaders across Oregon so they are not just navigating systems, but reshaping them. And we must be unapologetic about demanding equal pay in every corner of this state, unapologetic about insisting that education be accessible and affordable, unapologetic about calling out inequity, whether it shows up in a paycheck, a classroom, or a policy. So for 101 years, AAUW Oregon has not waited for change. We have made it step by step. It gets me very emotional. Law by law, opportunity by opportunity. And now it's our turn to decide what the next chapter in Oregon will look like. Will that student or thousands like her find that the math finally works, or that effort leads to opportunity, or that Oregon truly delivers on its promise? That answer depends on what we do next. So let this meeting be more than a gathering. Let it be a starting line, a place where we commit to action. Clear, focused, sustained, a place where we leave not just inspired, but organized, a place where we decide that the next year we'll move policy, we'll shift systems, we'll expand opportunity for every woman and girl in Oregon. The stakes are real. The moment is now. Let's get to work. I'm sorry, it's still very emotional for me, but I really want to introduce our hardworking program chair, Claudia Carmichael. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to say that over 100 of you registered for this year's conference, and we wouldn't have had such success without the communication and technical expertise of Randa Blanding, State Communications VP, Linda Liebecker, Tech Guru, Marissa Fink, Events Organizer Extraordinaire. Grateful gratitude also to Wendy Cook, Sheila Rammerman, Claudia Gray, Nancy Brown, Pam Shea, board members and other members who were so supportive and patient with my many, many questions about organizing this conference. Thank you. In these contentious times, we're very fortunate to have a representative of the Oregon Attorney General's office with us as a keynote speaker. When our originally scheduled speaker, Attorney General Dan Rayfield, had to cancel unexpectedly, Dustin Buehler, special counsel to the Attorney General, nicely agreed to step in to take his place, and we are so appreciative. I'm actually surprised either of these gentlemen would have even been available to speak to us. The Attorney General's office has filed over 55 lawsuits against the federal government since January 2025. Key actions include a lawsuit challenging a federal executive order aimed at limiting mail-in voting, a lawsuit against the EPA for rolling back mercury and toxic air standards, and a multi-state lawsuit attempting to block unauthorized access to private sensitive information. Just today, I received notice the Attorney General's office has moved to permanently block the order restricting mail-in voting. And now I'd like to introduce Dustin Buehler. As special counsel, Dustin directs the Department of Justice's federal accountability efforts and advises the AG on a variety of legal and policy matters. In addition to his work for the AG, Dustin teaches administrative law at the U of O. He previously served as general counsel for Oregon Governor Kate Brown, litigated cases in state and federal courts as an appellate attorney at the Oregon Department of Justice, taught at the University of Arkansas School of Law, and worked as a commercial litigator at Davis Wright Tremaine in Seattle. Dustin received his bachelor's degree from Willamette University, earned his law degree from the University of Washington, and served as a law clerk for Judge Alfred T. Goodwin on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. After Dustin Buehler has finished talking, you will be able to raise your virtual hands to ask questions. I know I definitely have some. So without further ado, I'd like to say here is Dustin Buehler, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Claudia. And it's such a pleasure to be here tonight. I should say it was not the easiest thing to come in from the sun. Here in Portland, we're having unseasonably warm weather on this spring day. And as somebody who, along with my daughter, has been to all 36 counties all over our state, I used some of your locations in your names to look up the weather where you were and where you are. And it looks like it's a nice day for most of you too, although a little cooler on the east side of the mountains, which I suppose should be expected this time of year. It's delightful to be here, but let me start with an apology. I'm really sorry that I'm not Dan Rayfield. And Attorney General Rayfield very much wanted to be here this evening. I think what this shows, the fact that you have, unfortunately, the B team tonight, is that the Attorney General, for all of his powers or authority, does not always have control over his schedule. And he wanted me to give his sincere apologies that he couldn't join you tonight. I'm delighted to join you. My name is Dustin Buehler. As Claudia said, I work with the Attorney General, with our Attorney General on our federal work, which has been keeping us very busy lately. And I work with several of our divisions within the State Department of Justice, including our trial division and our appellate division, our general counsel division. We're also in touch with many state agencies that are affected by the federal actions that we've seen out of this administration, along with our governor's office, Governor Kotek, and her staff. What I'd like to do tonight, and I really do want to leave plenty of time for questions and a dialogue. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. But what I'd love to do tonight is to spend a little time at first talking about the times that we're living in and the role of attorneys general during these times. I'd then briefly like to talk about how state attorneys general are working together in our coalition to respond to this moment. And then talk a little bit about our work and the cases that we have filed against the federal government in the last year and 2 or 3 months. And then before questions, if we have a minute or two left, I'd love to give my thoughts based on my experience so far to a question that Attorney General Rayfield gets asked all the time and that I get asked all the time, which is, well, what can we do in this moment? A lot of Oregonians at his town halls ask him that question. And I think it's a really good question to ask because regardless of our own personal politics or how this moment is hitting us in our communities throughout the state, I think that question, what can we do, is a really important question for all of us, each to ask ourselves and to answer. So I'll take each of those subjects in turn. And again, I'll save plenty of time for questions at the end. So let's first just talk a little bit about these times. These are very unique times in some ways, I suppose. And as Claudia mentioned, in these times, state attorneys general have filed a lot of lawsuits. So as of today, Oregon filed its 62nd lawsuit against the federal government during the second Trump administration. So that's a little more than a year. And already Oregon has filed over 60 lawsuits, 62 lawsuits. Just to put that in perspective, so during the entirety of the first Trump administration, the state of Oregon during those 4 years filed 50 lawsuits. So we are already well in excess of the total number of lawsuits that our state filed against the Trump administration last time around, for better or worse. And I want to just talk a little more about that in the aggregate because a lot of those lawsuits, while they really run the gamut from a lawsuit on birthright citizenship to a lawsuit, defending state highway funding, to lawsuits defending victim services funding, like it really runs the gamut. But in total, by our rough estimate, the relief that we've received to date from courts from these lawsuits have saved the state of Oregon over $4.6 billion in federal funding that this federal administration attempted to cut off for various reasons. So if you think about it, that's money that's going into our classrooms. That's money that is going to our public institutions of higher education across the state. It's money that is ensuring that we can keep paving our roads, supporting victims of crime, and all sorts of other things that are really important functions in our state. And, if you look at the money that our state Department of Justice is spending on suing the federal government right now, certainly we wish that we were spending that money on other things. But the amount of money that, state taxpayers have to spend to fund this litigation is a small percentage of that money saved. So by our estimation, for every dollar that taxpayers are spending on these lawsuits, we are saving over $1,000 for Oregon for every dollar that we spend. That's pretty good bang for your buck. In terms of this moment being unique, a lot of people ask, well, why is it so different this time around? Why are we in this moment where our state attorney general needs to sue the president more than 60 times in the first 14 or 15 months of a president's term in office? And here's my best guess on that. I think it is a unique moment for a couple different reasons. The first is that this president had time to prepare for this term in office, and this president's team and supporters had time to prepare for this moment in a way that very few former president or prior presidents could prepare. So, that conjures up in images of Project 2025 and other kind of ready-made policy initiatives that this administration was ready to roll out literally on day one. So that's one factor. The second factor in kind of my observation is that this is a president who is willing to push the boundaries of his power much more than his predecessors for policy aims, for political aims. Certainly, other presidents have done that, but I think the volume of that right now is higher than it has been. And then lastly, this administration was better prepared heading into this moment, but also state attorneys general opposing this administration were also better prepared. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on. But as a result, you had a lot of policies being rolled out very quickly, many of which are really pushing the boundaries of the law. And you had a lot of organizations, state attorneys general, businesses, individuals that were really unusually prepared and coordinated to challenge that in court. And as a result, you have, 62 lawsuits filed by the state of Oregon, and more broadly, over 500 or 600 lawsuits filed against this administration so far across the country. I will lastly say on this topic, structurally, the attorneys general and the states are serving a really important check in our system. That didn't start with this administration. Frankly, that has been true regardless of who's been in the White House. Whether it's President Biden, for example, with an effort to expand student loan forgiveness, right? The red state, so-called red state attorneys general suit over that, or it's a moment now during the Trump administration where they're pushing policy, pushing the legal boundaries on policy, and Democratic state attorneys general are suing. That is a function that's kind of built into our system. And it seems especially important now for that function to exist, given that Congress does not really seem to be, for better or worse, serving as a check against this administration, against the president. So I want to talk a little bit, just for a few minutes, on how attorneys general in our multi-state coalition are working together. I'm not sure if any of you caught this. There was actually a pretty in-depth, interesting article on this on Politico.com some months ago that kind of peeled back the curtain and described how our attorney general's offices are working together. So what I'm telling you is not, something that's not out there in the public, but it is interesting nonetheless. Our AG coalition, and by AG coalition, I mean the now 24 Democratic attorneys general across the country, started prepping for this administration months and months before the president took office. Indeed, almost a year before President Trump returned to the White House, these offices were already coordinating on the chance that that might happen. And, we were using Project 2025 and other policy papers and indications on what the president might do as a springboard to prepare for potential litigation, for potential policy responses. And I'll give you an example of why that was important to our coalition. So you may recall on day one of this administration, January 20th of last year, the president, after being inaugurated, went to a big arena and started signing executive orders, and then went back to the White House and signed another huge stack of executive orders. And one of those executive orders, you may recall, was the order on birthright citizenship, which was recently argued before the United States Supreme Court. Because we were prepared, because we had had discussions and made preparations almost a full year in advance, which was unprecedented, that meant within 24 hours of the president signing that birthright citizenship executive order, our AG coalition had not just one lawsuit on file, but two. And within 72 hours of that executive order being signed, a judge in Seattle, in a federal court in Seattle, had already put it on hold, had issued an order putting it on hold. So there's a real quick efficiency with our work, given how much preparation we advanced. as has been publicly reported, our staff from our 24 different attorney general offices get on daily calls together where we're, much like we're doing now, we're trading thoughts and what we're seeing. And so there's a level of coordination daily that is unprecedented between our offices, and that extends to the attorneys general. Initially, when President Trump returned to office, the attorneys general in our coalition were meeting daily. It's now a regular check-in. If not daily, it's still a regular check-in. And, one person pointed out to me something that I think is both true and fascinating, given that our coalition spans from Maine to Hawaii across this country. We literally have an around-the-clock operation. By the time Hawaii people, staff in the Hawaii Attorney General's office go to sleep, our colleagues on staff in Attorney General Fry's office in Maine are waking up on the East Coast. And so the staffing that we have, the capacity that we have is really extraordinary because not only do we check in every day, but we're working around the clock on issues that are important to our bosses, including AG Rayfield. So I want to just talk a little bit about that work. Attorney General Chris Mays, who is the Attorney General of Arizona, says it in a way that I think is really useful and interesting. So she says, when asked, well, how do we respond to this moment in time and to the federal administration that's willing to push the boundaries of the law? She says it really involves the three C's. It's courts, crowds, and courage. And I want to give a few examples of our work in the courts in the last year that kind of show those three things playing out. And the examples I'll give just to kind of foreshadow them are tariffs, voting rights in elections, and then our National Guard case here in Oregon. Each kind of highlighting, and by the way, you're seeing the sun dance on me here from my window because it's facing west, and so you can see that it's a nice day here in Portland. But I'll talk about each of those cases because they do highlight how our coalition works together. They highlight Attorney General Rayfield's priorities in defending Oregon values, and they also kind of show how in certain moments we're using courts and crowds and courage to respond to this moment, as AG Mays in Arizona would say. So first, our tariffs lawsuit. This was an Oregon-grown lawsuit. This happened right here. We led a coalition all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Little Oregon did that on behalf of a multi-state coalition, winning at every level against the president's efforts to use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to do something that no president had ever tried before, namely to impose tariffs of any amount on any country at any time at the whim of the president, even though if you read your United States Constitution, the tariff power, the taxing power is a power of Congress, given to Congress by Article 1 of our Constitution. It was an extraordinary moment when the president tried to do that shortly after returning to the White House. And private businesses sued, but the states sued as well. Oregon drafted a complaint for a lawsuit quickly and filed on behalf of 12 states. Again, spanning across the country, 12 states that were situated differently, but still wanted to challenge us together. And one thing that I think is really telling in that moment, a lot of people assume that people like me, other lawyers, are doing all this work and that, Attorney General Rayfield is a figurehead, or as he would say, a hood ornament on the car. That was very much not true when it came to tariffs. Tariffs literally was Dan Rayfield coming to us and asking the question, can the president do this? And it was him late at night on his cell phone when he couldn't sleep, scrolling through, Googling IEPA and reading the law and trying to figure out, is there an angle here? And coming to us, saying, hey, I think we should make these arguments, or have we thought about this? And so, as we think across these states about our attorneys general, sure, a lot of times because the volume of work is so high, they're not heavily involved in the specific work in a moment. This was actually an instance where Dan Rayfield was out front of this and was doing a lot of research himself and coming to us and kind of saying, look, we should try and sue over this because this doesn't seem like it's legal. And so we sued in the Court of International Trade, which is back in New York City, a federal court specializing in tariffs, and we started winning. So there was just a moment where suddenly in my email inbox, we had the court's decision it struck down all the tariffs, and my jaw dropped because I knew shortly thereafter that was going to be world news, that we had just, Oregon leading a coalition had just managed to throw a huge wrench in the president's trade policy because we thought it was unlawful the way that they were going about that. And then as we went through the courts, Oregon argued that case all the way to the Supreme Court. And last November, Oregon was before the Supreme Court arguing that case, and the Supreme Court ultimately agreed with us that those tariffs were unlawful. So, this case was just a good example, regardless of, what your take on this president might be. I think we can agree that any president, any public official should be following the law. And the Supreme Court, a court that, by the way, many would say is not naturally inclined to rule for a bunch of Democratic attorneys general, the Supreme Court of the United States agreed that the president was legally over his skis. And that was, in a way, a very vindicating moment for those of us that believe in the rule of law and think that any president should implement policy preferences in a way that is consistent with the laws. So I want to turn next to voting rights and elections. Look, I know that this is a topic that's front of mind for a lot of us, especially as we get closer to the elections this year. We have been very active in this space as attorneys general. It is a top priority for AG Rayfield, especially when it comes to defending our vote by mail system. As the state that really pioneered vote by mail for elections here in Oregon, I think that this is an area of special concern for us and also a very high priority for our team under AG Rayfield. So last year, when the president issued pretty early on an executive order that would have weaponized the Election Assistance Commission, we immediately sue and we won. We stopped that. When the federal government tried to get voter data from us, approached Secretary of State Tobias Reed and his team for voter data from Oregon voters, we sued and we stopped that. And the latest executive order that you may have seen news about earlier this month, where the president is trying to weaponize the United States Postal Service and our letter carriers, we sued on that too. And just yesterday, we asked the court to permanently, as Claudia said, permanently block the president from weaponizing the U.S. Postal Service, as we know that that's just a really important part of our vote by mail system. I'll also mention that the SAVE Act is front of mind for us. We know that this is alarming if Congress went down that road. Right now, it looks like perhaps that won't happen. But we've been talking about that a lot too in our coalition, and that is really front of mind for us. That laws, I'm sure many, if not all of you know, would do a lot of really not great stuff and could even interfere with the ability for women to vote if they've changed their names. And so that's very top of mind for us. As we say, as AJ Rayfield says, when asked, are you going to be ready to defend our right to vote in this election? The answer is not just yes, it's hell yes. And we will be there. We will have Oregon's back, and we'll be ready to go if and when any threats on that materialize. And speaking of threats, I'll lastly turn to our National Guard case. This was probably our finest moment, at least in the first year of the Trump presidency. And when I say our, I don't mean just the AG or the Oregon Department of Justice. I mean our moment, because if anything illustrates the importance of the C in the three C's that's for crowds, it's this case. So you may recall that Saturday morning in late September, I know I do, when suddenly my phone was lighting up and the president had just posted on Truth Social that he was federalizing our National Guard here in Oregon and sending them to Portland, to the ICE building in Portland. And, our team, as AG Rayfield has described previously in town hall meetings and in other settings, our team was meeting less than an hour later in the Oregon Department of Justice, even though it was a Saturday morning. And I recall it was a beautiful sunny Saturday morning here in Portland in late September. We were done with our weekend, and there were 10 lawyers and staff members from the Oregon Department of Justice, Oregonians, citizens that were suddenly working on the weekend around the clock. And when the president actually issued the order federalizing our guard on Sunday morning, we were ready to file a lawsuit in less than 5 hours after that. Like we were in court less than 5 hours later on a Sunday, and we had a motion for a temporary restraining order to get that stopped, filed with the court by 6 a.m. on Monday morning so the court was not even open, and we were already ready to go to defend that because our whole strategy in that case was to keep boots off the ground. We did not want our citizen soldiers in Oregon, Oregonians from around the state, our National Guard members, to be put in a position where they were in conflict and tension with Portlanders and protesters around the ICE building. And so, part of our strategy, really the whole underpinnings of our strategy in that case at the direction of our Attorney General, was to act as quickly as possible so we could stop the boots from hitting the ground, because we thought there was a very good chance that the situation could get worse and could get tense if that happened. And we pulled that off. Moment after moment, order after order, whether it was in the district court or in the Ninth Circuit, we worked around the clock that month to keep things held at bay, to keep our citizen soldiers at the time stationed at Camp Rylea out on the coast, which is where they were at. And then, just when we thought a week later that we had stopped that, and we had an order from Judge Immergitt in Portland, in the federal court in Portland, saying you can't send the Oregon National Guard troops to the streets of Portland. Hours later, on a Saturday night, I got a call from my counterpart in the California Attorney General's office saying, hey, we hear that there's California National Guard troops on planes to Portland right now. And so the very next day, on a Sunday, we were back in court before Judge Immergitt, asking her to stop that. And before the sun had gone down on that Sunday, Judge Immergitt had stopped it. And so, the thing I would stress here, I guess the first part of this, there was a role for heroic lawyers and staff at the Oregon Department of Justice. These are citizens. These are your neighbors. That was an important role. They played that role admirably. I am proud of them as colleagues. I know our Attorney General is proud of them. But there's another part of this story, right? And I think I'm going to hold up my only visual aid today, and the sun might block it. But there was this part of it. This is the Portlander of the Year, right? This is the frog. And when this whole thing started, I confess that I was pessimistic about our long-term chances of success. I thought that the lawyers and the staff and our Attorney General at the Oregon Department of Justice could hold them off for a bit, but I ultimately thought probably the troops would end up coming to Portland. The lawyers only had so many tricks, and it would be hard to keep them out forever. But what I didn't think about at the time was the C that's the crowd in A.G. May's 3 Cs, right? We were the courts, but there's the crowd. And really, it's the other C too, the courage. Because the way that people protested in Portland around the ICE building, I've been searching for a word, like observing it literally firsthand at times as a Portlander watching it. And I've been searching for a word to describe that. And the best word I've found to date in the English language is whimsical. There was a whimsy to it, whether it was the frog costumes, or there was a band down there playing, or there was freeze dancing in the streets. And I'm not saying that there weren't moments where, people in that crowd would break the law. There were, but also we had the Portland Police Bureau there handling that. And the crowd kind of writ large, there was a whimsy and a creativity to the protests that I think on a national level, both locally and nationally, made the president's narrative a farce. Just really took all the air out of that balloon in a way that was remarkable. And frankly, if it had been a different reaction, a more violent reaction, a darker reaction from the crowd, I don't think the lawyers, no amount of lawyering would have held that together. I think it probably just would have fallen apart. And so, for me, the National Guard case, the reason why I describe it as our finest moment is I think it demonstrates the 3 Cs, like really firing on all cylinders: the courts, the crowds, the courage. And in our country, I think you need all of that working together to check an office holder, regardless of power, regardless of circumstances, who is acting in a way that is straining the way that we're designed to work in this country under our system of government. And so I think we can hold that up as Oregonians as a moment where we kind of really shined in the national eye. And it's a moment that I know our Attorney General is very proud of. Okay, last thing, and I do want to then stop because I'm getting close to a half an hour here, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions. I lastly want to just kind of address the question, well, what can we do? Because as I said, AG Rayfield gets that question a lot. I think the first thing that I would say to that is, make your voice heard, particularly this year. That can be, and I know you're going to talk about some of your legislative successes in the legislature here. That's an important place to make your voice heard, obviously, is in Salem. Nationally, we have a very engaged congressional delegation, all members of our delegation for the House and Senate. And even locally, like locally is, of course, very important too, in communities to exercise your voice on any issue important to you. And if it's some of this federal stuff, yeah, that's really important. Like we need you and we need your help. The second thing is related, but I want to highlight it, and that's, talk with your community. And I will say, particularly children and students. So as the parents of, my partner and I are parenting an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old here in Portland. And there are just moments where they just don't understand what's going on. And I'll use my favorite example of that. That Sunday night when California had just invaded us and we were before Judge Immerget, I was multitasking. I was on my cell phone listening to that hearing because I had to go pick up my 14-year-old daughter across on the other side of town from a birthday party that she was at for a friend. And so when she got in the car, she's like, "Dad, what's going on? It's Sunday, you're on the phone again." And I just kind of in passing explained to her, things are just not going well. Like we have California troops at Camp Withicum that are trying to come here to Portland. We just heard that the Texas National Guard has been federalized and they may be coming too. It's just really stressful right now. That's why I'm doing this, and I'm really sorry. And I probably should have kind of answered that differently because in that moment, my 14-year-old, who had been hearing about what was happening for the last week, just kind of got emotional and asked, "Dad, why do they hate us and why do they want to hurt us?" And I just was kind of like, it really just checked me in that moment. It's like, look, there are children watching and we have to have a way to explain this moment to children. And the best I could do in that moment was, those are really good questions. And what you need to know is there are a lot of people supporting us right now. And also, this is a moment that shows how important lawyers are and judges and people that are protesting. And like there is a lot of good happening, not just challenges. But I think how we talk with our community and this obligation to talk with our community, and particularly children and the students we encounter who are trying to make their way through this world and make sense of this world, like the fact that we as adults struggle with all our experience to locate this moment in our understanding of how this should work and to explain it to ourselves. I mean, just that's even more challenging with children and students. And I think we all just need to be resources for them in this moment to help them get through this moment. And the last thing I'll say, the last suggestion I would give, and really interested in kind of other suggestions you have on how we can make a difference, is, we need to help our neighbors. I'm fortunate in that there's really not currently a direct policy threat that's making my children or our immediate family fearful in the way that some of our neighbors are. And I just think we have an obligation to try to help our neighbors in this moment. The gold standard for that, frankly, in my observation, is what happened in Minnesota. I think that the way that community in Minneapolis recently reacted and supported each other when there was a lot of challenges that one would naturally assume come from 2,000 federal agents suddenly descending on your city. I think hopefully a moment like that won't happen here. Hopefully we won't have to deal with that kind of challenge in our state. But even smaller challenges, like we need to be there for our neighbors. And I think our friends in Minnesota showed a way to do that, that we need to observe and listen to and replicate in our own Oregon way. So anyway, the last thing I'll say before really stopping, and I'm 31 minutes in, is, I'm also asked, well, are you optimistic or pessimistic? Like, is this all just going to fall apart? Are we going to have another election? And I will tell you, and this is true with our AG too, with AG Rayfield, I think we're fairly optimistic that there's enough checks and balances here, and there is enough muscle memory of how our systems work that we can make it through this moment. Now, look, like, sure, there's some damage. Like, I'm not pretending like this is all fine. But I still think what I see is a resilient country that can get through this moment. And, we're all just a big part of that. And so I remain optimistic. And I'm going to stop there. I'm really going to stop. And I welcome your thoughts and questions.
Well, thank you, Dustin. I think some of us are feeling a little bit more optimistic than we have been for about 14 months. Thank you. Okay, questions? Remember about your hand. Does everybody know how to do that? You go to the reaction and you can raise your hand, and then I or Catherine will call on you. I'm hoping that we will see you. If you raise your hand, it should come up too. I know you guys have questions. You always have questions. Okay.
Annie raising. You see some?
Susan
McCracken has her first hand up.
Ashley.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, my camera isn't working. Thank you. Let me just say that. What would you, in thinking ahead about our mission for women and girls and the future, what would you suggest is the most powerful lever that we could pull as an organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I say that, like I said, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and it's not lost on her some of the challenges right now. Both the policies that this administration is pursuing, but also some of the ways that this administration is pursuing those policies. I mentioned the SAVE Act. That's a good example of some of that, but honestly, it's much broader than that, as we all know. And I think an organization like your organization, understanding that a lot of the value of the organization is in its nonpartisan nature. Like, as Claudia, I like the way that you said this to me. You all can be political, but you have to still be nonpartisan. And I think that's the right frame. And I think that gives you a credibility, this organization, a credibility that, frankly, partisan AG offices may not have, serving an elected official with a party label. And so I think, you can be good partners approaching this from, an angle where you have expertise in terms of, some of the policy impacts here, but also you have a voice, whether it's, lobbying elected officials or, forming those networks with other advocacy organizations and other policy shops, and other interests around the state, groups and interests, where you're just speaking from a more credible, well, and I'm not meaning to say that we're not credible, right, in our office, but you know what I'm saying. I think that you have a unique kind of angle to this, and there's a lot of us that are eager to partner with that, understanding, of course, that you can't be partisan, and that is not an expectation we would have. There still, I think, is a really important partnership here.
Great.
Mary Pat.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. What an excellent presentation. I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate it very much, Mr. Buehler. I have a couple of questions regarding the lawsuits that we have filed. One is, I'm interested to know how many of these 67 have been joined by other states. And the second thing is, have any red state AGs cooperated with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are great questions, and I'm trying to find an angle here where the sun is not whiting me out. But anyway, it is very, very nice out in Portland. I look forward to being outside after this. So to take those each in turn, the vast majority of our lawsuits to date against the federal administration have been multi-state lawsuits with many states on them. It is not uncommon that we have 15 or 20 states on these lawsuits. Oregon has had a leadership role in probably 10 or 12 of those where we're really out front, and we're in a small group of maybe 2 to 4 states that's leading that lawsuit. And then we are, of course, proud to join any lawsuit where joining that lawsuit would defend Oregon values and, help be a backstop for the people of this state. There are a couple where Oregon has gone it alone. Initially, our National Guard lawsuit here, for obvious reasons, because the threat was so uniquely local, we filed that lawsuit along with the city of Portland. After, I don't mean to be humorous when I think there's a certain gallows humor that one has to have in this line of work. And so when I say, after we were invaded by California, California joined our lawsuit too. We were proud to have them join our lawsuit. They're also, the other one that comes to mind is we filed a lawsuit along with the city of Newport and the Fishermen Wives Association on the coast, challenging the potential location of an ICE facility, detention facility at the Newport airport. So that's another example of a very local threat. And our AG and the Department of Justice here, look, we're willing to go it alone if we need to. Like, we're not shy to do that. To date, the interesting thing is the vast majority of these lawsuits have really been policies that have affected all of our states or several of our states. And, to that number earlier, right? Like, we spend $1 on litigation, we get $1,000 benefit. A lot of that is that, it's pennies on the dollar if you can kind of stick with friends and everybody's doing a little work instead of, you do all the work. So that collaboration has been really great. The question is an interesting one about, hey, what about red states? To date, we have not had any red state AGs join our lawsuits. We are welcome. Well, if they want to jump on board, this does not have to be a partisan thing. We know that many of these policies are hurting them as badly as they are hurting us. We know that. And I think it's an interesting, I guess all I'll say on this is I think it's an interesting commentary on American politics that despite that hurt, you have a reluctance to be seen challenging the president of your own party. And I'll leave it to the other duly elected attorneys general across the country to sort out kind of whether that's good or bad. But it's a fact.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any hands. Marcia Kelly.
As I was
Marcia?
in the car today, I just heard your friend Chris from Arizona has filed.
Chris Mays, yes.
Mays, yes, has filed an additional lawsuit challenging doing a detention center right across from a chemical facility.
Yes.
So she is doing courage.
Yes. Well, she is. And there was a similar lawsuit filed by Attorney General Anthony Brown in Maryland. There was a warehouse that they were trying to convert. It's really interesting that kind of that Oregon, I believe, was the first state to file a lawsuit to stop something like that. I could be mistaken, but I think we might have been the first. And there now are several states that are filing those types of lawsuits, and they're doing so using the National Environmental Policy Act and some of our federal environmental laws, which mandate that before you can do significant build outs like that, you need environmental impact statements and you need to make sure you're not, hurting the environment. Turns out that's a terribly convenient tool to slow something down. And so AG Mays in Arizona, you're right, filed a lawsuit today. One thing it's not really implicated by your question, Well, it sort of is because you said she is courageous, and that's true. Here's why she's really courageous. This is an attorney general down there in Arizona who won her last election by 280 votes in Arizona, which is a state larger than Oregon, as we all know, with its population. And she's up for election this year. So, there's no guarantee she's coming back. And yet, one thing I've been impressed with AG Mays is that is not stopping her from doing what she thinks is the right thing.
Good. Next question, Sharon Noon.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for the update. We get little smatterings about the lawsuits, but it hasn't been a cohesive picture. And I'm co-chair of the Public Policy Committee for Oregon AAUW. And I'm wondering, does the AG's office have some sort of newsletter or some kind of method of doing updates for the public in terms of on kind of a monthly basis what's going on so that we could help our members keep track better of your wins and your potential challenges?
It's a great question. We do. So there is, I believe on our website somewhere you can subscribe to a newsletter that goes out fairly recently, I mean, fairly frequently. And maybe Claudia, through you, I can find that and get that to you.
Great.
For those who want to be kept up to date. There's two other resources that I'll put in the chat. We have on our website, on the Oregon Department of Justice website, a federal litigation tracker that's updated daily that gives the latest. It's a list of all 62 lawsuits filed to date. We add we every time we file a lawsuit, we add it there on this first web page that I linked to. And so if you want to know in real time kind of where particular cases are at or what we're doing, that's a resource that I would recommend you check out. And then also the second thing I linked to is actually a running tally of how much that's saving for Oregon. So you'll see, like, if you click on that web page, it says 4.6 billion, and then it breaks out per lawsuit. Not every lawsuit that we file saves Oregon money. Like Oregon National Guard, we did that for other reasons. We didn't do it to keep grant funding flowing to Oregon. But for the subset of lawsuits that do save our state agency clients or universities money, that keep that money flowing, we like to keep a rough tally of that just to show, kind of that effect of this.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it seems like every day, but maybe every other day, I get an email that they have filed another lawsuit and it talks about it. And I signed up on the website. So, other question, Wendy Cook.
Yeah, actually, before my question, I have a comment too. I've been following it I had followed Dan Rayfield on Facebook, and it's very casual, but he or his team have been really good about posting things on a timely basis out there too, especially the successes. So I found that a good way. And then plus I get to see pictures of his whippet now and then. And so that segues into my question for you. I'm kind of wondering, like, is your total team, are there about like 10,000 of you? Because that's what it seems like for the amount of work you're doing. How big is your team? And is the spirit of the team right now must be really exciting time. It's either terribly exciting or terribly demoralizing. I'm not sure which for you guys. What's it like?
Yeah, those are great questions. So the size of the team, we didn't really know the best. Initially, we were kind of grappling with, well, what is the best way to staff this, right? We don't really know what we're getting into here. And I think Dan Rayfield guessed right initially, because the way he set this up, there was no magic way to do this, and different states do it differently. But he thought, and I think this was the right move, that we needed to assemble a core team of lawyers and staff that were focused on only this work. And look, the understanding is hopefully that team's not going to be doing that work forever. Like, they'll be folded into other really important work that the Oregon Department of Justice does over time when the threat has subsided. So we built out and we have a core team for this work of about 4 or 5 lawyers in the Oregon Department of Justice. Staff is probably another 3 to 5 designated staff members, paralegals, legal secretaries. And then, but that's not always enough. I mean, in a moment like National Guard or tariffs, where it's really all hands on deck, we have to flex. And, that first meeting with National Guard, we had 10 people in that room. And when we were in trial, we probably had 20 from the Oregon Department of Justice in that room. And so the other correct move that I think our Attorney General did initially was set up a hub and spoke, a kind of flex model. So in moments like that, when California invades or when suddenly they're trying to federalize our National Guard or we want to stop illegal tariffs and it's a big project, we have a list of interested attorneys and staff who are, I mean, this is all voluntary. Nobody has to do this work in the Department of Justice. But those who are interested in doing the work, we have a list of people we can turn to, and we do turn to that list. So for example, two of the key attorneys in our National Guard lawsuit who were in court for us were actually from our civil enforcement division. These are not, trial division attorneys. They're really talented attorneys that are elsewhere. We actually had the deputy chief counsel for our general counsel division, who normally doesn't litigate. Suddenly she was one of our frontline litigators writing motions to the court and National Guard like through the night. And we had, for tariffs, even though we were in a trial court and normally you would turn to your trial division, your trial lawyers, we actually went and just commandeered a couple really good appellate lawyers that are normally in appellate courts. So we have these kind of all hands on deck moments. Importantly, nobody is forced to do this work. Like, we understand we're a big agency. Oregon's a big state. We understand that, even within the Oregon Department of Justice, some of our attorneys or staff likely voted for President Trump, and they just have opinions that are different than this attorney general. That's fine. They're not being forced to do this work. They do, we have attorneys that do other really important work, staff that does really important work that's unrelated to this federal stuff. But for those that want to do it, we have a flex model so that we can get those resources when we really need them. The morale question, really quickly. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's highs and lows, and our team works really well together. We work really well with our AG. There's an esprit de corps that I think is just so important on our team, and it's why little Oregon, even though we don't have the resources of a California or a New York Attorney General's office, we're really punching above our weight. And I think that's not only the smart kind of resourcing that we're doing with the resources we have and the flex model, but it's also just this good esprit de corps we have. And yes, it's stressful at times. It's scary at times. But there are moments where we are just so high on this work. And, National Guard or tariffs, those are two just really good examples of that, where we really felt like we had made a difference along with many other Oregonians. And that just feels really good.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see any other questions. Going once, going twice. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you.
We've learned so much, and we feel so much better that you guys are, all of you, not guys and women.
Yes.
Working together to save us. That's what it feels like.
Thank you for inviting me. I will, I'll pass along your good wishes to our AG, who again wishes that he could have been here instead of me. And I do encourage you, he really is trying to do town halls around the state. He's already been to many locations, even many locations already outside the Willamette Valley, because he doesn't want to just stay in the Willamette Valley here. And he'll be doing town halls all over the state in the coming years. Please, if you have the interest and the time, go to one of those town halls. He'd love to hear from you.
Well, I see he just was with Minneapolis and Illinois 2 days ago. I guess it was Zoom, but that's good to talk to other states, because we don't want to be all alone out here.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
That was
I want to take a little breath. So now we're going to talk to our state public policy co-chairs, Sharon Noon and Diana Ricks, and they will tell us about the public policy bills that AAUW chose to support during this last legislative session, and then they'll talk about priorities for the coming year. So Diana Ricks is going to start and talk about the bills.
Thanks, Claudia. Again, Diane Ricks, I'm the state co-chair and a member of the Lake Oswego branch. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a huge basketball and football fan, and I'm talking anything from third grade rec league through high school, college, professional. If it's played with a round or an oval orange ball, I'm there. One thing about teams that you learn is that there are those teams that have the superstars or the money players, and there are those teams that function as a team. Not any night, one or another player can be the star. And we had that here in Oregon for quite a while. We had a star. And when she retired, we had to learn to be a team. And so that's kind of where we are right now. When the 2026 legislative session ended in early March, all 5 bills that we advocated for had passed. They are now signed by the governor and will become law. These bills were chosen by the committee as they addressed the concerns expressed by the membership in the past. Last year, we had done a survey of members to see which issues were of biggest concern to them. And two things that I think were very helpful to the committee this year. One was that the committee increased its membership by 5 this year as new branch policy public chairs joined the state committee. And the thing this has done for us is it has given us, the committee, a much broader understanding of the issues that affect and are of concern throughout the entire state. And this is particularly true for areas in Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon and on the coast. It's real easy to get focused on the I-5 corridor, but the state's bigger than that. So this has been a big help, I think, for the committee. The other thing that we did this year in an effort to try to get the members involved, since it was a short session and we couldn't really do a lobby day, was that we asked branch members to send emails to their individual legislators, urging them to support any specific or all the bills that we were advocating for. We provided the members with a sample email, and these emails initially identified the writer as a constituent and a member of AAUW. And then there was a section that provided the member to add 2 or 3 sentences of why they supported the bills. And we hope that this would give our efforts more visibility, and I think it did. As you can see by the slide, the 5 bills concerned healthcare, childcare, education, physical safety. In addition, we also advocated for a joint resolution which proposed to use some kicker money for firefighting and education. That resolution, however, died in committee. The public policy committee members, as well as the branch members who sent the letters or emails rather to the representatives, we feel were instrumental in our success, because while we didn't have what was a traditional lobby day, we felt like we were getting our message and our name out there, and we hope to build on that success during the long session in 2027. And one of the things you can see, there is the HB 4079, which is about schools' response to ICE. Its effective date is going to be 9/30 of 26. This bill asks that each school and institution of higher education have a defined process for notifying people when ICE was going to be on the campus. So one of the things that members can still do this year is every one of your school boards probably has a website. You can go to that website. You can check what their agenda is for their next meeting, and you can see if that subject is being brought up. Then if you're even more curious, you can go in and look at their minutes from their meeting if they do going to discuss that particular, how they're going to respond to that, and see what they came up with. That would be interesting information to provide to a member of the committee that you know, or to Sharon and myself, so we can kind of see, are they doing it? What are they doing? What's the different approaches being used throughout the state? So, as I say, we were very, very successful this year. We hope to build on that success next year. Sharon?
Thank you, Diana. And I just wanted to insert that we all did it. We all worked together. We got these 5 bills passed, not just us alone, but we can do this. You know, we're looking for things to feel good about, and we can feel good about this. So pat yourselves on the back, and then we'll get ready for next year and the Public Policy Committee priorities.
Thanks, Claudia and Diana. Diana's really hot about this school district thing, and we haven't done so much at the local level at that kind of thing, and we hope to do more of that this year. We're also going to do more branch visits, or at least area visits, so that we get to know the people all over the state of Oregon, because there are 800 roughly AAUW members in Oregon, and we'd like to be able to hear from all of them if they want to talk to us. Marissa, if you'd go back one slide, I want to mention just one thing on the bills. You notice that the reproductive health care and gender affirming treatment actually took effect on 3/31/26. That bill was heavily lobbied from all over the United States, because what was happening was that other states were coming to Oregon and getting people from those states that had gotten health care, like abortions here, and taking them back and prosecuting them. And this law makes it illegal to do that. You'll also notice that the daycare subsidies, which is the last bill, went into effect on the 7th. Childcare and daycare and child education is very important in many parts of the state, and we were really pleased to see that we got enough support to get that one passed. The big winner was the second bill, 4022, which was the Oregon Imagination Library Program. That went through the legislature in less than 10 days and was on the governor's desk halfway through the session and signed. So it was a really big deal. There had been some other legislation that enabled it. So we're excited about that when it comes on. Okay, Marissa, can I have the next slide? When we went to look at priorities, we wanted to make sure that we weren't so definitive in our priorities that it made it hard to include some things. And we asked for help from all over the state. One of the things that was very interesting is that Betsy McDowell from the Salem branch, their group had a large committee that is working on the very unfortunate scores that we have for reading and math in the primary grades. And they came forth, and on this slide where you see that it's in bold, supporting communities, school boards, and state legislation to improve reading and math metrics, graduation rates, attendance, and repeating testing opt-outs. they added, that's called a friendly amendment to the priorities. And Betsy came in and advocated for that, and the board agreed to include it in what you're going to vote on tomorrow. All of the bills that we picked fall within the categories that you see here: education, economic security, health and well-being, and protection of our democracy. I want to mention just a couple of things that are kind of interesting. The bill that Diana mentioned, the joint resolution that was to give part of the kicker money for wildfires and education, if the kicker was big enough, the the evidence and the testimony filed by people all over Oregon was so massively opposed to that bill that it never made it out of the first hearing committee. So it was their money, and by golly, they wanted to keep it. The other thing that I think is important, and the most important bill for me, would not necessarily have fallen within a very strict interpretation of priorities. One of the bills we got passed was 4149, which requires school districts to admit homeless students. It turns out there are 21,000 homeless students in Oregon. And if you didn't have apparently a residence address, for some school districts, they were not allowing you into school. And that's what that bill is for, is to allow students who are homeless to be able to go to school automatically without an address. We wanted to have a lot of latitude so that the committee, and hopefully next year, because we'll have the time, the 800 members of AAUW in Oregon can pick bills and areas of interest that are critical to us, not just kind of a laundry list that comes from somebody else. So we're looking forward to having lots of contact with all 800 of the members. You'll have the opportunity to approve these priorities during tomorrow's business meeting. This slide, something like this slide, will be available for you to see. You also got a copy of these priorities in an email that Randa Blanding sent out midweek this week. It didn't have the new language from the friendly amendment, but it had all the rest of this. So we hope that all of you show up tomorrow and vote for our priorities. My email address is on the first slide in this batch. And but lots of people know how to get a hold of me and Diana. So if you have a question or if you want to suggest something, get a hold of us anytime you want. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon and Diana. And thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you tomorrow at 2:00 for a very brief business meeting. I know people aren't that excited about business meetings, but for one thing, we need to vote on the priorities. And Marcia, do you have a question?
I do. I have a response to the things that are on the want list. And one of the concerns that I have is that the Public Policy Committee, since about 10 years ago, has backed off of encouraging a fair, adequate tax system. The kicker issue was one of them. But unless, this is what I said one time when asked why I was in the Revenue Committee advocating for revenue. If you do not have revenue at one end of the building,
you do not have programs that get funded at the other end of the building. And I'm really concerned that our membership needs to realize that. The kicker is not people's money. The kicker happens because the economic people at the state cannot determine how much money the state is going to have 2 years in advance when we have all kinds of things that happen, like wars come on, other things. And so at some point, I would really actually like the Public Policy Committee to reconsider leaving out advocating for a fair, equitable tax system into the public policy. It's not a sexy thing. It's not like reproductive rights. But unless we do that, we're not going to have education. We're not going to have preschool, and we're not going to have things that Oregonians want.
Marcia, I love what you just said, and I was not aware. 10 years ago, I wasn't in AAUW, so I didn't know that. If you could send, Betsy McDowell is well aware how to get a hold of me, and I think she's in the same branch that you are. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And I can find out how to get a hold of you anyway, but that's
yes.
okay.
But
and I will do some outreach because
Diana and I, at least for me, I've not heard that this was advocated for previously. And of course, but if you read the testimony on the joint resolution about wildfire and education as part of the kicker money, if it was big enough, you got the impression that people's view, citizens' view, was it was their money. No one had the right to take it away from them. And there was a lot of testimony. That's the reason it didn't even make it out of the first committee hearing. So
I do understand that. The thing about it is that it takes education to tell people why the kicker is there. And we're the only state that has it, and it decreases our ability on bond funding often when things go a little bit sideways like they're going to do right now. So at any rate, I will stop my ranting, but I just wanted to let you know that I think that AUW as educated women need to do something and not say, oh, this is too complicated for us.
oh,
Good point.
I love your ranting. Rant
Thank
on.
you, Marcia. Good point. Okay, Mary Meyer or Mayor. I want to make sure I'm saying it
It's
right.
Mayor.
Mayor. Mary Mayor.
Yeah, I'm the president of the Gresham area branch. I just have a request. Before tomorrow, can we get a copy of the policy priorities with that new language included? Please. I don't know.
I
if
would
who's
think we could
responsible for that, but
figure
that
it
would be-
out one way or another.
It's on the
We're
website.
just happy somebody's reading and interested. That's great. We'll figure it out.
It's on the website currently under public policy.
Okay, it's on the website. Does that help, Mary? It's on the
yes and
AUW
no.
website.
Mary,
Yes.
since I am also part of the Gresham branch, I can guarantee you that you will get a copy of the new wording before tomorrow.
Bless you. Thank you very much.
But you also can get it off the website.
Okay, which I'm going to cover in my little end of meeting speech.
Duly noted. Thank you.
So with that, should I ask for any more questions? No, that's tomorrow. So tomorrow, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And I'm sorry that it's a sunny Saturday. I was hoping it was rainy and icky, but it won't take too long, just 2 hours. We're going to have a quick business meeting, and then we'll have the award ceremony, and that's fun. And we get to hear from Rachel Cushman, our 2025 AAUW Fellow, and that'll be a good thing. And in the chat, there will be the business meeting agenda and the annual report. And they will also be available on the website. And they'll be sent out in the coming month. So you'll have lots of different ways to access it. The annual report I love reading it every year. I know it's 30 some pages, but I download it to my computer and it just has things about all the branches. You can see people, there's photos, and Marie Mueller does such a good job putting that all together. I hate to have it wasted. So hopefully you can access that. And if you're not going to be there tomorrow, never fear. Next year, 2027, we're already starting to plan the conference on April 30th to May 2nd, 2027. And it will be in beautiful downtown Salem at the Salem Convention Center. So it's very centrally located to everybody, and I think you'll enjoy yourself. So plan for that. And before we close, Catherine, do you have some final words?
I don't have many final words, but I do want to say thank you for facilitating most of this. Dustin was awesome. It was wonderful to hear. And Sharon and Diana, thank you so much for sharing your insights about what kind of good work you've been doing up in Salem. That's exciting. I often talk to people about, we get our heavy lifting done in Washington, D.C. and Salem. So that's really, really important. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for being here.